Welcome to the Second Bite Podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome back. We are on the Second Bite Podcast. I'm your host, Todd Taskey. Jeremy Weiss is your guest today. Jeremy is the president, CEO, and founder of Rise 25. Jeremy has hosted probably hundreds of interviews and podcasts with successful business owners of all types, including many agency owners. And he is my guest today as we're going to kind of flip the script a little bit on this episode. But Jeremy, I am super thrilled that you are with me today.
I'm excited as well, Todd. And, I always mention you because when I say Todd takes private equity and agency owners and mashes them together. And I say, check out his Second Bite podcast because he finds that sometimes these agency owners make more on the second bite than they do on the first, and people are immediately writing down. So I encourage everyone, especially if you're an agency owner, you binge watch the Second Bite podcast because I have. And so
thank you for that.
I want to start off with you posted something out there that got a lot of attention. So I wanted to have you elaborate on that. And you were talking about that gloom will not reach these founders. So talk more about that.
So, I was reading the Wall Street Journal and they talked about the gloom in private equity. And the reason for the article, the point of the article was that private equity raised about half the amount of money last year as the year prior. And so this is spelling doom and gloom for private equity and private equity backed and blah, blah, blah. And I thought to myself, geez, man, I just haven't seen that. Right? We had a really good year last year. Some of the deals done directly with private equity, many of them done with private equity backed companies that are growing rapidly. And I think what I noticed, so we did 7 transactions last year, and 3 of them were what I would consider opportunistic transactions. And for example, one of the podcasts people should probably listen to is with Ned McPherson from Enrock. And so I got introduced to Ned in June or July. And we had our first conversation late June, and his transaction closed at the end of November. And kind of the point of the story is it was a great transaction for him. His company, Enrock, was sold to Power Digital, which has been a great success in their space, but also to their private equity investors and the management team and all their employees. Anyways, Ned got introduced to me, and and Ned was just heads down growing the business, like a lot of founders do of this size. And I said to him, what's your plan for growth? And he spelled it out in a very typical way that a lot of private equity guys do. A lot of founders do. And I said to him, listen, man, we should talk to 2 or 3 or 4 groups that I know really are looking for CRO, conversion rate optimization. Long story short, I took the episode that people can watch on the Second Bite podcast. He sent me a Loom video of him doing an audit of a client. I sent it to 3 groups. All 3 of them made an offer for the business. And he had a real selection of what it is that he wanted to do. And this, I think, Jeremy, is the tricky part. And you know this because you're a founder and an entrepreneur as well. That a lot of us just stay focused on what we're doing day to day. And we stay really focused on our internal metrics. And internal metrics of growth and EBITDA and retention, and all very important. But for companies in the $1 to $5 million EBITDA range, sometimes it's the external factors, the market opportunities that create maybe more opportunity for the right transaction than the internals do. And so Power Digital is a great business. They paid, I would consider, somewhat of a premium because it was such a great fit for them, but they now have CRO. They're not going to buy another CRO business. So that window of opportunity has closed. It doesn't mean that it wouldn't open up for somebody else, But we see that, and we've done a few of those. Geez, I went off down a rabbit hole. So when I, kind of heard this, or read this article from the Journal about gloom in the coming year, I think there are many CEOs that look beyond just their internal measures, and this quote unquote gloom or dire circumstance, will not affect entrepreneurs like that.
And Todd, I want to point out that if you are listening to the audio, there is a video piece, and I did pull up the PotomacBusinessCapital.com/podcast page. So, and I did, you can check that out there. And then the Ned episode was there as well. That kind of brings me to another question on this, which is, and I don't know if you have, stats or anything, but it sounded like this was like a very strategic type of acquisition. So, with Ned, and so they were able to add another service. Is there, do you see any, I guess, breakdown of, okay, the private equity wants more of a strategic acquisition, or they want something that's, doing similar to what the other companies are doing? So like if they had a bunch of CRO companies and go, hey, we want another one, and just build the best, companies in the CRO space. What do you see with strategic buyers versus just similar type of company?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a couple of buckets to think about that fitting into. So last year we sold this company REQ to Trinity Hunt, and REQ was a really good business. Probably around 20-ish million of revenue, 7-8 years in existence, great leadership team. Trip Donnelly, drives that ship. And they were large enough and big enough to be a platform company. And so private equity looks at that a little bit differently. Once they acquire a business like that, they will look at that and say, where's our opportunity for growth and where are our deficiencies? If you look at a company like Power Digital, and by the way, Grayson LaFrenz is a real powerhouse. He is executive chairman now of Power Digital. He's also been on the podcast. That's like a year or so old, a couple of years old, maybe.
Yeah, I listened to that one. That was a good one.
He really kind of digs into how his relationship with private equity accelerated the growth of his business. He was with the guys at Periscope Equity, which are terrific in Chicago. The people at Court Square, we've done 2 transactions with at Power, and they're terrific. But now that, for example, there's a great platform company, the private equity partners, the management team say, okay, where are we, for example, as Power, where are we deficient and where we think we could get better? And one of them was CRO. And I happen to know that, just like I know that there's 2 or 3 companies right now that are looking for e-commerce capability. They're looking for paid social. They're looking for Shopify. They're looking for performance video. They're looking for verticalization in the performance marketing space. Part of my job is always having these conversations with people, right?
Yeah, you want to know what people are looking for.
Exactly. And so because that creates opportunity that creates the exactly what I'm talking about, like we did with Ned, for those guys, right? There's other groups that are smaller, more in the $1 million to $2 million of EBITDA range, that is probably too small to be a platform company. But if they have a real good service capability, like for example, last year we did a transaction with WDG, really good in their space, which is leaning a little bit more towards nonprofit and government organizations, really good web development in addition to digital marketing. They filled a real need for the people at Agile as they're growing rapidly. And that was a perfect fit. The people at Digital Impulse did a great transaction with Demand Drive, and they filled a need for them in the marketing capability that they wanted to bring to their customers. So that creates real opportunity for smaller groups. And for example, Andrew from Digital Impulse did a podcast episode with me. And he talks about him doing a transaction fulfilled his personal growth objectives for where he saw his agency going. And there's a whole big chunk of work that he now doesn't have to do that he was just able to plug into and accelerate his growth more. So it really depends. One of the things that is always interesting to me is that, founders and CEOs in that $1 million to $2 or $3 million of EBITDA range oftentimes don't realize the breadth of opportunity and choices that they have in doing a transaction. Many of them still say, I didn't realize I could do a transaction and still play an important role in the growth of the business. And that is alive and well today more than anything else.
It's interesting you say that because, I talk to a lot of agency owners, and you're exactly right. That's kind of what comes up again and again. And when I explain, no, you should talk to Todd or listen to his podcast, and like, oh, I didn't realize. I just figured, I was thinking when I sell my company, I am out and I have to find something else to do. And that's not the case with this. You can keep doing what you love to do, even more. And, from listening to your show, it's like they can zero in on their superpower and what they like to do more, and have the other pieces are helped with the parent company or the other companies too.
Yeah, I was with Ned just a week ago, and he is now the chief growth officer of Power Digital. I think Power's 700 employees now. He's doing only the stuff he really likes to do and has jettisoned the rest. I see that with, Ab from WDG. I see that with Andrew from Digital Impulse, from a lot of the transactions that we've done. And if you think about it from the buyer's perspective, if they get the opportunity to bring a successful entrepreneur into their organization, the last thing they want them to do is fill out TPS reports, track down accounts receivable, worry about HR issues, right? That is clearly not highest and best use. So they will spend plenty of time focusing on how do we get the best out of this new executive that we have on our team.
I remember, I think, and I don't know when your episode with Grayson came out, but I listened to it a year ago, I think, exactly almost a year ago. And if people want to check it out, it's how Power Digital grew from 5 million EBITDA to 30 million in 3 years. And there's a part
those facts
one,
are 100% true.
and
5 to 30 in 3 years.
There's a part 1 and part 2 of that. So you can check that out. But you mentioned before about market opportunities. And so you completed this past year, maybe around 7 or more transactions. And which do you think qualified more on external factors?
So so I'll give you an example, a little behind the scenes. So Grayson was on the podcast, I guess it was 18 months ago. And when we were done, and again, he's dynamic, you should really listen to that. When we were done, I said, tell me your priority list. And you can't see it here on the screen, but my wall right here is full of people doing stuff and looking for things. He said, we need CRO, we need performance audio, and we need analytics. And so that trophy on the end there, Sproutword. When Sproutword is a company south of Boston, when I talked to Grayson, they have a great data platform. And here's a perfect example. So they have a great data platform, and Kevin and Scott, the guy, and Annabella, the founders there. So we have a great analytics platform. Next year, it'll be really good. The year after that, it'll be what everybody else has. Unless we spend a lot of money to keep that thing current and to meet client needs and everything else. And even if we do that, the hardest thing for us to do is get access into customers because they're large enterprise and we're a sub $10 million agency, for God's sakes. So that was a transaction we did that was opportunistic because they needed that, and the guys at Sproutword didn't realize the opportunity. Endrock also went to Power because Power's filling in, slivers to their overall offering. Demand Drive was in a target where Digital Impulse would give them some of the web development and the marketing into the same market niche that they were. And so I knew that Andrew was looking for ways to continue to grow. And so those three were a little bit more kind of one-off. The transaction we did with REQ, we had 5 offers for. So Tripp and the executive team there had their pick of who would be the best strategic fit for them to accomplish what they wanted to. AB at WDG was really the same thing. So those were all, and then even we did a really good transaction with iLawyer Marketing. Mike Perez, for example, you should listen to him. He is on the podcast. And Mike talks about, and this is another interesting rabbit hole we could go down, but Mike had a few offers for the business, came down to 2. One of them, he would have joined a group that just was being acquired by private equity. And so a private equity thesis is usually 5 to 7 years. And so these guys are in year 0, year 1. So Mike knew if I join these guys, I should be prepared to be on board for 5 or 6 or 7 years. The deal he ultimately went with, which was even a little bit less money than the other one, those guys were already in their 4th year. And Mike wants to eventually full-time work on developing software. He's got a whole bunch of ideas in his mind. So he wants to ride that to the end. And then as opposed to that being 5 or 7 years, he's looking for a 1 or 2 year, right? I've got 2 companies I know that are looking to acquire first half of this year so that they could maybe exit and sell themselves again, probably to larger private equity sometime in early 25. And so that and guys that were going to exit in that period of time are going to have less upside in terms of a multiple on the equity than somebody that's just getting started. But these are all the layers of decision-making that if we do our job well, that we can bring these options to the founder and the CEO to decide what they want their next couple years or, half a decade to look like.
What are some other factors the founders should consider when they're offered these deals? One of those you just mentioned, which is what year is that private equity in their acquisition phase, right? Because if they're going to sell in 5 to 7 years and they're in year 1, well, you have, 4 to 6 years there. But if they're in, like you said, year 4 or 5, and that founders and they may not get as much money, right? And they may not roll in as much equity and all of those things because it's later on. So that's one factor in what year is that private equity in making the acquisitions and selling. What are some other factors that you advise the founders you work with to think about or consider?
Yeah, so there's a known and unknown. Let's talk about the known ones first. Known are obviously what's your EBITDA, what's your margin, your EBITDA margin. But the 2 biggest drivers are going to be what's your retention, your revenue and customer retention, and how much of your revenue is recurring. Those will have an impact on overall value. Those are the known. The unknown, and this is one of the things that people don't realize until they go into it. I was talking with Matt Sunshine last night. Matt was on the podcast, I think, a year ago. We did a great transaction for him. We sold him to Gemini. Matt just did his first transaction that closed in January. What I tell people is going through a process is clearly the greatest consulting that you could do for your business, because you're going to talk to people that own a checkbook, know this space very, very well, and do not care about your feelings. And so
right.
the only reason we won't do a transaction is because of value. It's just not enough value, or not the value you thought, right? And now it's not the value. Again, if we talk to 10 or 15 or 20, you're going to hear the same recurring themes from these people. Like you do too much of this and you don't do enough of that. And then, there's the other thing, right? And because of this, that, and the other thing, here's what we see value as. When you hear that from multiple intelligent people, you say, okay, so maybe this, that, and the other thing. If we're going to work really hard for the next couple of years, we should work on this, that, and the other thing. Because if we improve these, we know that the market will value us higher. Or, and this is a really big one, or you look in the mirror or look at your partners and say, you know what? This, that, and the other thing's a pretty heavy lift. I mean, I don't know if this, that, and the other thing is worth the risk, the expense. And if we're only going to get, for example, if we were only $1 million off the value we thought or whatever, at least we understand why they're valuing us now. We should take the deal today, take that cash, and then roll this amount of equity so that becomes worth a whole bunch more in the future, as opposed to trying to squeeze out a little bit more. Or we realize fixing this, that, and the other thing is not that difficult. We're actually already pursuing those solutions, right? That
optimistic CEOs and entrepreneurs, I feel like whatever the real answer is, would think that, oh, it's not that hard to fix those things.
Unless
I put myself in that category, but
I mean, we all do that. And the hard things are hard for a reason, right? And I see this all the time, Jeremy, and you might as well, because you talk to a lot of guys. The difference between someone doing 2 million and 10 million of EBITDA is sales. The 10 million EBITDA company has a sales function. It's really expensive and difficult to get going. What I hear from a guy doing 1 million or 2 million, I think we're going to hire a sales guy this year. Private equity has never said that. Private equity says we are going to build out a sales function. You know what that means? That means 3 salespeople and a manager. Oh my God. Do you have any idea how much that costs? Yeah. But we can't get to 10 million without it. So we're going to do that. And it's not coming out of their pocket.
So someone may, in that situation, be like, listen, we know this is going to take a lot of time and energy. We're willing to take less money and leapfrog and just, with private equity. And obviously, like you talk about the second bite. So in that case, they would come in and get help with building that out. And then, they're rolling equity in with the sale, but they may not get as much of a value on the front end. Is that accurate to say?
So let's go back to Sproutward. Sproutward doesn't have, at the time, so over a year ago, doesn't have salespeople, right? The founders are doing the sales. Power Digital has a dozen salespeople. You know what a dozen salespeople come with? Dozens and dozens and dozens of relationships. And they literally walk these guys in, and surprisingly, it's gone incredibly well. And so I talked to Kevin not that long ago, and he said it is all the people we could never get to. These guys are just waltzing us in. And so this is the big decision. As an entrepreneur, should I try to build out my own sales function? Or if I could plug into it, think about that. If I could plug into it and accelerate my growth, and if we could negotiate maybe a bigger earnout along with the equity we have, maybe a package like that makes more sense to us. And until you start having conversations, you just don't know what the need is, what people want, and what the solutions to you might be. And this goes back all the way to the Gloom article we started with. We're so focused this way oftentimes, if we could just look up a little bit on the horizon and ask some of those questions, that's where the future direction of business comes from.
Where does someone have to be maybe in their revenue journey where it makes sense to talk to you?
Well, first I would say most of the transactions we do are $1 million of EBITDA. We've done a couple that are smaller than that were real. Like we did Worth e-commerce a couple of years ago. They were a little bit under $1 million. They do email marketing for e-commerce customers only. They're a top level on Klaviyo. That was just a real simple niche. CRO, same thing. Data platform for D2C brands. So if you're a real specific niche and you're smaller, these opportunities become available to you, right? So I would say, $1 million-ish, and usually guys are anywhere from maybe 15% EBITDA to 20 or 25, depending on infrastructure and the rest. So, that would translate to 5 or 6 or 7 million of revenue. But really, the part that makes it interesting to a future buyer is the capability set and EBITDA that's $1 million or more.
Earlier you mentioned iLawyer and Mike Perez. And you did an episode with Mike. People could check it out. But is there anything else on that you want to expand on or you would find interesting?
It was a great transaction to do. Little behind the scenes there. Sunstone Partners owns a company called Everservice, right? That's the group that they back. Everservice bought a company called Blue Corona a few years ago. Blue Corona does digital marketing in the home services vertical. They wanted to also be in the legal vertical and then also probably in a third vertical, which I'm not sure they've identified yet. And so they really liked Mike. They liked the business a great deal. It was very profitable, had great software, had all those things. And as I said, here's what I would say. When we reached out to Mike, he had an LOI. And he said, listen, I know enough to know I shouldn't do this by myself. So we'll hire you. And the end result was, and this is kind of the point of that episode, we got a higher value for the business that was 5 times greater than our fee, number one. Number two, he had no escrow. In his first LOI, I think the escrow was 7 or 8 million. We got them to provide rep and warrant insurance. They paid the premium for the rep and warrant insurance. We negotiated probably a better non-compete for Mike. We negotiated a whole bunch of little things that become important in a transaction that really set up a transaction for success going forward. And it's different when you're selling and leaving, because then you literally just fight over every dollar. When you are going to be a partner for some period of time, there's more art than just the science. There's relationship. There's other things that are going to be important that you have to consider, which is what makes the work that we do so much fun and so interesting. But there was a bunch of good lessons from Mike. He expands on it from his perspective and talks about it and shares actually pretty openly in that episode. So Mike Perez episode's a great one to listen to.
When we look at the next year, talk about, do you think there are going to be fewer special opportunities like you're talking about with market opportunities, or what are your thoughts coming up?
I don't see anything really different from last year, and last year was a great year. I think in the size of the market that we are in, the 1 to 5 million of EBITDA, macroeconomics and those things play less of a role. If an entrepreneur is building a good business, good retention, happy customers, great service, great margins, there's always an opportunity to do something there. We had Dave, who's the founder of Broadtree, was on, just a couple episodes ago. Broadtree will partner, they're a private equity group. They'll partner with a founder and a business at $1.25 million of EBITDA and help that operator acquire and grow and build a real organization at that size. So when I look at the relationships we have and the opportunities to fit into something larger or to do your own thing with kind of rocket fuel behind you, I'm optimistic, number one. When I think about the larger trends in the digital marketing space, that's a business that just still has really strong tailwinds to it. So the combination of those two things, I think, creates nothing but interesting opportunities going forward for the next year or 2 or 3.
I have one last question, Todd, before I ask it. I just want to point people to check out, you can go to secondbitepodcast.com that'll redirect to his podcast page. So check it out. And PotomacBusinessCapital.com is the website. And they also have a podcast in the navigation link that you can check all of them out. But my last question is, you said you have a board in front of you with all this stuff listed on it. Talk a little bit about what are people looking for now? Like we're talking about now, this point in time, it may change in the future. But if someone is an agency with these capabilities, or they know of an agency with these capabilities, maybe they should message you. What are some of those things that people are looking for now that's on your board there?
Yeah, there's just so much. I've got people looking for social. I've got people, the social channels, both paid and earned. I've got people looking for performance audio. I've got people looking for performance marketing by vertical, by different verticals, home services, legal, healthcare, elective medical, all of those things are of interest. People that do Shopify marketing on the different platforms. I got people interested in that. As an example, the guys at Periscope Equity reached out to me a couple months ago. They took Power Digital from 5 million of EBITDA to 30 in 3 years. These are really good guys, and they really know the space well. And they reached out to me and said, we have an e-commerce thesis. We're just going to close on this business here soon. What else? And here's some of the things that we need to plug into that. So that's ground floor opportunity with somebody like that. I got a call from a group in Chicago that I like a lot, the guys at Keystone Equity. They said, hey, we just acquired this great business that does marketing strategy. We want to implement some of the tactical performance things. What do you have on the performance side? Paid, social, earned, all of it, right? And I've got, people that need email marketing, people on the Klaviyo path. You got any good HubSpot partners? All of it, right? And so there's opportunity all over the place. And then it's a matter of, do I like these people? Do I want to be in business with these people? Do they have the same views as it relates to timing and creating value and when we're going to exit? And so there's a whole bunch of other, levers that have to match up. But when they do, we have lots and lots of really happy entrepreneurs because it creates a bigger and more exciting future for them. And it also does it, what I have learned is if somebody can put $1 million, or in most cases, several million into their bank account, their stress level goes down and their risk tolerance goes up. And especially because they're not spending their own money to execute on the goals that they know are important. So watching that happen in real time is a lot of fun, and being able to play a role in helping that happen is great. So, I just see all sorts of great stuff for the next 24 months at least.
Todd, as always, this is a master class. I love hearing your lessons, knowledge, and stories. Everyone can check out secondbitepodcast.com or go to PotomacBusinessCapital.com and learn more. And thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, and I will say this. I always enjoy these conversations too, Jeremy, and I enjoy talking to entrepreneurs. So you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on the website and all like that. As great as I like, and as much as I like to talk to entrepreneurs, I find that they like to listen to other founders and agency owners. And that's the greatest feedback I get on the podcast, that when I can just listen to other guys in my shoes, whether I want to do it, because we have a series called Go It Alone for guys that said, I don't want to partner with private equity. I like what I'm doing here. I just want to do this. And so we try to represent both sides of that. We've got private equity guys. We have the next episode, Jeff King talks. Jeff King has a great business. They spent like 8 months in this big exercise to pick a private equity partner that they wanted to be in business with. And he talks all about that, right? And I could tell you about it, but hearing it from him and the guy that went through it is just so much better. So I'm happy that that we're able to do that and have those conversations, and then to share them with with other founders.
Well, thanks, Todd. Everyone, check out more episodes, Second Bite Podcast, and we'll see everyone next time.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.